Secondary to higher secondary, I think it's very low. It's of the order of 30% only, I am told. So we have to improve these rates if the GR has to be pushed up to by another 10% or so. Now, vocational education, unfortunately, is very fragmented in the country. I am aware one of the reasons perhaps is that vocational education is not preferred or is not sort of that much pursued is perhaps the respect society has for vocational education. The blue-collar jobs are not that much respected. Now, we have to create that respect. The minister mentioned about National Vocational Education Qualification Framework. I think it's a great idea. The only thing is we have to come out with a viable solution where the bridge courses between somebody who has done vocational education and when he wants to go to the higher education or other normal education, the bridge courses should not themselves become so daunting and so heavy or so much long that the one is scared away. I think there will have to be some little more thinking on that. Now, National Mission on Education through ICT is a very good mission which Government of India have launched. And in this, about 5,000 crores of rupees are being spent by Government of India, have during this last 5-year plan, and this is likely to continue. In this, they are creating, they have connected almost, I think they have already connected about 300 universities with 1 Gbps of connectivity, and also about, I think, 15 to 20,000 colleges have already been connected, and they are also being given about 15 to 20 megabytes per second of connectivity. Now, these are very good developments. Plus, government is in the process of coming out with a low price access device, which I think will facilitate usage of ICT by all the schools and colleges. DTH and EduSat platform is also already being used by IGNOU for their Gyan Darshan, Vyas, and other channels by Eklavya channel and things like that. But I think there is a need to proliferate this. We must have more than 100 or 200 channels which will continuously beam these programs. Now, private investment has to be attracted in education, but unfortunately, I think there are some policy imperatives. One is that the private sector cannot make any money in education. Now, while this is so and should be so, I think there is also a need to incentivize at least anybody who wants to contribute for an educational institution. I think ATG benefits should be available even for new institutions which are coming up, etc. Plus, I think this higher education refinance corporation, which is being talked about, should be brought in quickly so that they can get refinanced loans like NABARD gives for agriculture. That would facilitate investments by private sector. In fact, there is one more idea which is because today, through our educational institutions, hardly 3 to 5% or maybe less than 5% of the total research which the country does gets done through educational institutions. And what we spend on research, which is the key for creation of knowledge, is itself only about 0.85% of our GDP, which is very low, whereas others spend 2 to 3%, most of the other developed countries. If we are able to allow this profit or the surplus from these educational institutions to be plowed back into research, I think that would be one way out which can take care of both the research. But of course, we can also put caveats that an industry would be allowed to plow back this for research only once they have fulfilled their own duty of spending 2.5 to 3% from their own money. If they want to spend over and above that, then I think it should be welcomed. Because today, hardly 3 to 5%, as I said, is being done through our educational institutions, while the figures for Canada is about 35%. UK is about 30%. Now, there are several bills on the anvil which Minister also had alluded, especially the foreign education providers bill, etc. Now, of course, let me submit that it's not as if Ivy League institutions or the top 100 ranking institutions would queue up to come and invest in India once this bill is passed. But I think it would facilitate some investments and gradual collaborative efforts, little more of twinning and other things, which of course twinning can take place even today, even without the bill, but it would facilitate and create a framework in which this kind of global cooperation can take place. Equity is another area, but I think government are doing enough on that area. In fact, all our IITs and IIMs, I'm proud to say they are all fulfilling their reservation obligations. Even in Berkeley, I am told 50 to 60% of their intake in their second or third year comes from community colleges. So I think the equity and excellence can coexist. On that, we should have no doubt. Now, unfortunately, we have no Indian educational institution which is in the top 100 or 150 even ranking. And it's only perhaps IIT Mumbai which figures somewhere towards the end of 200 list. Now, Richard Levin, the president of Yale, finds it very anomalous. He says, how's it that India, which provides so many of the top people for all industries, Fortune 500 companies, has not been able to develop institutions of excellence which are in the top 50 or 100. Now, of course, Minister has talked about educational reforms. The only thing I would like to submit is that the states must also adopt these educational reforms, and it can be made a precondition that if they want any help from Government of India or UGC, they must subscribe to this. Now, 14 innovation universities are on the anvil, and there again, I think a lot of cooperation and collaboration can take place between the government of India and the foreign institutions. Now, any innovation university or world-class university, there is a concentration of talent, both students and faculty, abundance of resources, autonomy, quality teaching, etc., and quality research. And I think all these 14 which are on the anvil, I hope they will be able to have some very effective collaborative efforts, and they'll have all the autonomy to do it. Now, I want to also submit that it is not only in India that we are having a concentrated effort to have 14 innovation universities. We also have very good universities like Delhi University, JNU, BHU, Aligarh University, or Hyderabad. There are several of them, BHU. Now, while they can be strengthened, there can also be these new universities. But a similar effort is also in other neighboring countries and other countries like C9 initiative in China, Global 30, now it's 13 actually in Japan, Apex program in Malaysia, Quality Framework for Higher Education in Thailand, Operation Campus in France, where they again are concentrating on a few educational institutions and trying to push them so that they are in the top 50 or 100 ranking. Now, we have a very huge shortfall of PhDs in our country. Now, one of the reasons why I think we are not able to have many people taking to PhDs, etc., is perhaps the teaching itself, I think, is not a preferred profession, unfortunately, in the country. The respect for teacher has to go up by the society. I think this is one of the imperatives that the society must increase its respect for the teachers. Our higher education institutions have to be locally relevant but globally engaged. Now, research deficit is one area which I would like to just touch upon. I think this is one of the most glaring deficiency of our educational institutions, and also one of the reasons why they are not able to come up in the top rankings. Now, we have only 150 researchers per million in the country, while China has, I think, 750 to 800, USA 4,000, Finland, a small country, has 7,000 researchers per million. Now, when it comes to research papers, India, with 17% of the population, hardly publishes 2.5% of the total world's publications, while China, I'm sorry, I'll have to keep comparing with China, though some of the figures they say are suspect, but even then I think it should give us some idea. They are at 9 to 10% of the total publications. 38% of our publications do not get cited anywhere. So this is another minus point. Only in the PhDs, in 1985, I believe, India had 4,007 PhDs in science and engineering, whereas China had only 125. They have gone up to 6,500, while we have gone up to 6,500, while China has 25,000 or so today. Again, figures may be somewhat, we can doubt them a little bit here and there, but even then this gives the magnitude. Now we have to increase the number of PhDs by a factor of 10, if not more. And there has to be very liberal funding for the PhDs, because this is another area which will help our faculty shortage. Today it's again a pity that while we insist on B.Ed or some training for teaching in the high school or intermediate, there is no such requirement for teaching in the higher education system. Now, it is unless a PhD is there who has learned through assistantship or in the initial phases, I, in fact, feel that some of them are not able to do a good job while teaching. Now, PCT application is another parameter which gives an indication of the research output. Now, India's PCT is Patent Cooperation Treaty, which is an international application which gives you some kind of a 18 months period for filing, prosecuting your patent in other countries later on, and gives you the priority. India had 1,050 last year, hardly 0.69% of 1,62,000 applications which were filed under PCT, while China had 12,000, USA 45,000, Japan 30,000 or so. Panasonic company of Japan, just one company had 2,154 applications, patent applications. Even University of California had 3,006 PCT applications. Now, I think one of the reasons why we are not able to do research well is the reason which Minister had mentioned, that we are in silos. So the research, if it has to create knowledge, has to be multidisciplinary and in fact even multi-country now, because some knowledge we have, some knowledge somebody else sitting elsewhere has. So the need for these meta-universities where within the country and even outside the students are able to sort of collaborate. There could be joint PhDs where we have joint guides with other Ivy League institutions and others. There should be an efficient system of filing patents, and also, incubation of these patent ideas should be there, which should be successfully taken care of. Then we should have earmarked budgetary allocations for research so that the research does not get diluted. I think let's understand how this new knowledge has enriched various countries at various points of time. In the 20th century, whichever people unlearned the old things faster and learned the newer technologies, newer innovative things, prospered. And Industrial Revolution led to new riches, but much of the world was left behind which did not dare to unlearn old traditions and methods. So the challenge is to unlearn the trappings of the old without forgetting the core values. So the mantra will have to be, we'll have to unlearn, relearn. Now, very rarely does the world or the Committee of Nations wishes a country to succeed. I think a time has come where the world wants India to succeed, and I'm sure we shall not disappoint them. Friends, sorry if I've taken a little longer time. Now, I'll request, we have very distinguished panelists. You are going to make a, I think, presentation. Is there any other presentation? Perhaps not. No, presentations are there. I mean, I'm talking of the PowerPoint presentation Pankaj is making. Thank you very much for giving this patient hearing. I would now request Professor Ramamurthy ji to give his address or his presentation.